Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Death By, where contestants will earn reps for their arguments for a chance to stand on top of the podium pedestal. I am your host, Lauren Khalil. Whoever I decide has the best argument through the final round will earn 30 seconds to talk about a topic of their choosing. Our show is sponsored by WZA, and thank goodness for that, because we are headed to Wodapalooza just about tomorrow, and then the action starts. Who knows how much sleep we're going to get, but I know that with WZA, I'm at least going to get good sleep when I'm actually back to my hotel room in my bed about 30 minutes before. Take my WZA, lights out, and I'll be feeling refreshed and ready to go for another day of crazy Wodapalooza coverage. We got teams, we got individuals, we have several divisions. It's going to be full chaos, but I know I can rely on WZA to help me get sleep when it's needed most. If you want a chance to get a nice discount on your WZA, you can get 20% off by going to TYRWZA.com, TYRWZA.com. Use code DEATHBY and you can save and get extra sleep starting pretty much immediately. On today's episode, we have a full stacked show of two-time Affiliate Cup champion and seminar staff head trainer, James Hobart. CrossFit Games reporter, Niki Braizer with kettlebells and cocktails. CrossFit Games athlete, Tim Paulson, and now dad of two. You look awake and ready to go. And for the first time on this show, we have CrossFit Games coach of champion Jeff Adler and co-owner of CrossFit Wonderland, Carolyn Lambray. Welcome to the show. We will be seeing you also in Miami very soon. CrossFit, they recently announced that GORUCK will be the official shoe and apparel sponsor. What are your initial thoughts on this decision? Tim Paulson, we will start with you.
All right, solid one to kick it off. Overall thoughts, I think it's actually really cool. It's a good partnership alignment. You know, they kind of grew up in the CrossFit space. I guess from a company standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I like the vibes. I like all that good stuff. I frankly have never worn their shoes. I have no idea what their shoes are like. I don't know how the quality compares to something like, Strike, Noble, Reebok, all the kind of common players in the space. So I can't really speak to their gear. I have worn some of their apparel and I enjoy it. I think the biggest question mark I have is if they're not the title sponsor. I don't think they are. They're just like a major sponsor, and how that may or may not affect prize purse for athletes, because obviously Noble and the previous title sponsors, they fork over a lot of that money. So I don't know if that gets positively or negatively affected. And I guess from a company standpoint, to me, it kind of makes sense not wanting to be the title sponsor, because that's a lot of money to throw up. And I would imagine not a whole lot of return, return on that investment, I guess. So I like it. I like the company. I like the sponsorship and the kind of value alignment. But like I said, I have some questions as far as how it impacts things financially.
3 points for Tim. We will get to his follow-up question after we go around. Niki, you're up next.
Yeah, I agree with Tim. I do like it. I think that there are a lot of really big feelings about this announcement online over the last few days, and I don't really understand that, because bottom line is we do not know how this affects the business one way or another. Like, to Tim's point, typically a title sponsor would put up a little bit more money, right? Because then they would have their name in the logo. Us on the broadcast, we'd never be able to say the words CrossFit Games without also saying that brand title sponsor. So you have to imagine that there would be more funding that goes into that. But we've no idea what it means from an allocation standpoint from CrossFit's perspective, not having that title sponsor, and whether that will impact things one way or another when it comes to the things that we know those title sponsors pay for at the games, like prize purse and like, part of the broadcast. And now, especially since there are 3 different events that I'm hoping get all sorts of different types of broadcast attention, we just don't know. We just don't know what it means. So outside of looking at GORUCK, the brand, and saying, how do I feel about this brand just being a part of our CrossFit community in a bigger way? I like it. I think when you look at it, it certainly has roots that run deep in a military background, which aligns very well with what we do within our community. And they obviously have been making products and pieces of accessories and pieces of training accessory that we've been using in competition for many, many seasons. I also have never worn their shoes, shoes, but I'm excited to try them out. I just don't have anything negative to say until I see how it kind of plays out. It's too early to tell, but I will say that we talked about this on the Weekly Buzz yesterday, shameless plug for my own podcast. GORUCK seems to have maybe fewer like international legs than some of the other sponsors that we've seen in the past, like Reebok. So as CrossFit continues to grow globally, I'm just curious to see if that's impacted one way or another.
Carolyn, just over the border in Canada. Any thoughts on that? Oh, and 3 points for Niki.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to second that. I mean, I think as a brand, there's nothing wrong. And the fact that it's not the title sponsor, right? I think it has a little bit less weight, a little bit less importance. Like if it's just a partner and it's a partner amongst others, you want to make the right decisions in terms of who you're partnering with. But they seem to make good quality, clothes, shoes. I have tried their shoes. I like them. But yeah, and that in terms of a partner, that's all I have to say. What does it mean now that the games won't have a title sponsor and all of that? I have more to say about that. But GORUCK as a brand, I think it's a good fit for CrossFit. Like Niki mentioned, internationally, like I think it's an interesting shift in terms of who is bringing what to whom. Like Reebok was bringing credibility to the games as a title sponsor. Noble had like a lot of branding that they were also kept bringing to the games. Now it seems like, well, who out of the two brands, CrossFit Games or GORUCK, has more of a pull in terms of branding and having that international reach? I feel like the CrossFit Games are giving more in terms of that kind of partnership to GORUCK, which might be what they're looking for in that type of partnership.
Interesting perspective. James, what are your thoughts? 2 points for Carolyn.
I'm really excited. And one of the main reasons I'm excited is, and I don't know the CEO of GORUCK, Jason. I have not met him yet, but I know Jimmy Letchford, their president, well. I've run into him in the CrossFit space for a long time. And I like how he spoke directly to affiliates. And so what I'm really interested to see, obviously GORUCK, I think matches like the core vibe of CrossFit. What I'm interested and excited to see is how does GORUCK reach out to affiliates. I haven't seen a lot of our sponsors from the get-go speak directly to affiliates, though I know Reebok for a long time worked on that relationship. But also, how does GORUCK speak to the maybe fresh to CrossFit crowd? And so I'm excited to see how they do that. Obviously, like I said, they fit our vibe. What I'm hoping is that we don't have a title sponsor. It allows other endemic sponsors to play more aggressively at the games and across other events. So other footwear and apparel sponsors hopefully now feel like they have some elbow room to step up, sponsor athletes, obviously TYR with Wodapalooza. And I'm always looking down the road of when can we get, and I know I probably just sound like a corporate stooge, a really, really, really massive sponsor to like support some of our biggest events or get involved in a partnership way. Like, hey, G-Shock, I know you're out there listening. Like, I love that they're involved. Want to see more of them. Waiting on the Chase card or the Rolex sponsorship or something like that. Who knows?
Ooh, hey, I would not mind that at all.
You know what I mean? Like, when are those things happening?
4 points for James. Are you confirming then that there is in fact no title sponsor? Because I think it's assumed, but I don't know that anybody has come out and actually said it.
That's fair.
Yeah, I won't shoot myself in the foot here. I actually don't know the answer to that question, so I'll plead the fifth on that one. But like I said, I think it leaves open more space for sponsors to continually play in the space, whether they're familiar sponsors that grew up in our community or other larger sponsors that and companies that might exist out there.
Mm-hmm.
But excited,
Okay, so
totally excited for GORUCK and what they mean and how they represent CrossFit. So pumped for that.
Okay, so then again, assuming that there's no title sponsor, what are some other ways that y'all think that this could impact the games? Is this a good thing to have more smaller brands in the play?
Can I have a response to that?
Yeah, jump in, whoever.
I think the financial answer there is no. To James's point, like we need an endemic brand to come in and really help support our organization financially. So in that respect, maybe not necessarily, having a ton of small brands isn't necessarily going to do exactly what having a car brand or Rolex for that matter would do. But there is something to think about in terms of CrossFit going back to owning its own branding and not necessarily needing to share that space with a title sponsorship when it comes to the sport side of things. And depending on what the organization is doing to grow the sport side of things, and maybe it'll branch off and look very different from the training side of things moving forward. I mean, the logo is different, that everything could be different, but if it can own more of its own branding there and not necessarily need to rely on a different organization to share that space with, then that could be a plus in many ways. I don't know.
Carolyn, you said you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up. I think that owning their own brand and storytelling from like now until, 10, 20 years from now, I think it's good that they don't have a title sponsor because they'll be more in control over their image. In terms of having the title sponsor, like what did that mean for other brands coming in, right? When Noble was there, could other bigger brands want to be in Vendor Village? Or were they blocked? Like, what did those contracts kind of look like? Like, I don't know legally what that looked like, but I feel like not having a title sponsor can actually give more space for everyone and bigger brands to coexist in that space. And that could bring more money for CrossFit.
So then I think one of the questions that Tim brought up at the beginning was, where does the prize purse money come from? Any thoughts?
I guess that's like, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, but I'm just thinking about like some of the sports that I watch and follow. And like, if you take out kind of the big four, American sports who obviously are well solidified in their own branding, like the NHL isn't sponsored by X, but like if you look at something like golf, most of the time, each golf tournament has a title sponsor that provides a ton of prize money, that does a ton of advertising, and just really pumps money into the economy of that event. And I feel like you kind of need that in that structure of, I guess, organization, competition, things like that. X Games, kind of same thing, like these more one-off style events. You need somebody flooding cash so that you can provide good prize purses. You have a lot of eyes on it. You can help with the broadcast, things like that. So I don't know, is there a sport that doesn't do that that's similar to CrossFit, that doesn't have a title sponsor? Does anybody know of one? Because I don't, but I don't maybe follow the one that.
Well, that was what I was trying to research. I was thinking of like, not like NHL or group like team sports, but if you look at Wimbledon is Wimbledon. It might have partners and major partners, but when you say Wimbledon, it's not the Wimbledon presented by Nike, is it? Or I'm not sure. I was trying to look, like if you go for the FIFA World Cup, it's the World Cup. It's not the World Cup presented by so I know they have partners, and it's the same thing for the Olympics. Right? They have huge partners that contribute a lot of money to make sure that these events run. But again, it doesn't have that like wording association that the media had to say of the Reebok CrossFit Games or the Noble CrossFit Games. Like now it's going to be the CrossFit Games, and the CrossFit Games is going to have major sponsors or major partners, but a partner and a sponsor, I think, is going to be different, and that relationship is going to be different.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious, like I'm not at all like versed in that, but I was trying to look at it and see if you had that visual, if you had those connotations that we had as the Reebok or Noble CrossFit Games in other individual sports, and that doesn't seem to exist.
I guess my thought on that, like I think Caroline has a good point, but I think also like those events are still backed by massive organizations.
Yes.
Like the World Cup is backed by FIFA. Like tennis is backed by the ATP Tour. All the like they're backed by these events that are also bringing in money. Like the games aren't backed by anybody. I mean, I guess they're backed by the organization of CrossFit, but again, everyone kind of seems to think that that's a losing money proposition. So like they need outside investment. So I guess I don't know if that. I guess that model works for them because, I mean, FIFA is as corrupt as they come. So I guess the World Cup is probably not the best parallel to draw for.
Yeah.
I see what Carolyn's saying. And
I just wouldn't put it past CrossFit or the games organization to make its own rules in that respect. Like, I'm not arguing we need bigger name brands to come in and provide money. And of course, that money is going to go to funding, some of the bigger expenses, which could be, or at least should be, right, Tim, the prize purses. But I wouldn't put it past CrossFit to kind of like structurally and financially make their own rules, being like, if you are any kind of sponsor, you must contribute X percentage of your sponsorship toward X, Y, or Z, prize purse, broadcast, whatever. We have no idea how it's set up structurally on the inside. So it's hard to say.
But I think it'll be easier to get those bigger brands or more money, just because like the structure of corporations, like if you look at Johnson & Johnson, like how many parent companies and all of this, when you have a title sponsor, you're potentially shooting in the foot of some of those parent companies, and then you're losing the whole thing. So like, again, from a business standpoint, like people who know more about business and structure and like all of that, like I think it's a good thing for CrossFit to just be the CrossFit game, own the image, own the brand, stand for something. But in terms of just creating a relationship with other brands and partners, I think it's easier if they don't have a title sponsor. And I could be wrong.
So quickly, just from what we know and the way that we've had this conversation, let's just quickly go around. Do you like that there is potentially no title sponsor, or not like it? So like or not like? Who said like it?
I like it.
Okay. Who else?
I like it.
I don't.
Okay, Niki and Tim.
I don't really care. I don't like if the question is like, is GORUCK a good partner? I'm like, yeah, I think that they will be, or at least I have no reason to think that they won't be. Whether they are or are not the title sponsor, like I don't know enough about how this is going to work out to give a shit. I don't know. There are pros and cons on both sides. You know what I mean?
I would say no, I'm hesitant because it's the first year in a long time the games hasn't had a title sponsor, and I wonder why that is. I guess it makes me a little like suspicious. What was that, James?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah, I'll just say I guess I'm a little skeptical. So I would say no, only in the sense that I feel like the title sponsor for the last decade, whether Reebok or Noble, whoever, they've brought a lot to the table. Like they brought a lot to the vibe at the games. They brought a lot financially, and I'm a little suspicious about what it means and what it looks like without that. And I would love to be proven wrong. I mean, it'd be great if I was proven wrong, but I'm a little. I'd say I'm.
Tim loves to be proven wrong.
I'm a little suspicious.
Change his mind. Change his mind.
I'm married. I'm used to being proven wrong. It's fine. It's part of the.
For sure. Yeah, I get that.
All right, lots to still figure out. Let's head into round number 2. The 2024 Adaptive CrossFit Games by WheelWOD announced the dates for their premier event to be held on September 19th through the 22nd in San Antonio, Texas. Now, as many of us might have been scrolling through our 2024 calendars to mark in those dates, you might have noticed also that weekend is Wodapalooza SoCal. Do you guys find this problematic to have 2 major events on the same weekend? And if so, what could potentially be some solutions to ensure the success of both of these competitions? We will now let Carolyn start this round.
I would say I don't know. I went on the Wodapalooza SoCal website, and it doesn't say what categories are going to be participating. So we know the Wodapalooza Miami edition has a lot of the adaptive, but does that mean they're going to have the same in SoCal? So since I can't find the information, I'm like, well, is it going to be a problem? Would it be a problem? If the WheelWOD is the games of the elite of those categories, then everybody else is not participating there. So they can participate somewhere else. Would that mean there's less viewers, there's less participants like going to San Antonio to the WheelWOD games potentially? But I'm not sure how much of a fan base they're going to attract or trying to attract and all of that. So having their own separate event, like I'm very I'm not sure.
Okay. 3 points for Carolyn. James, I know you have to go soon, so you probably won't win this week, but we'll still hear your response to this question.
What if I do? What if I win right now?
Right now. I mean, give us a bomb answer right now.
Don't let me let you down. Yeah, I definitely think it could pose a problem. And I think this goes back to the first question about title sponsors. So in some ways, the reason I'm less worried about not having a title sponsor and seeing this entire sponsorship journey in a different light is that CrossFit is still in its nascency as a sport. And we've changed a lot of things from last year, sending the masters divisions and the adaptive divisions, outside of the core games weekend. The entire season is different. And so what that means is I think we have to find a new way to work and how these events are going to go. But to the points earlier made, yeah, absolutely. Not a lot has been announced about the SoCal Wodapalooza, but if they, as Wodapalooza has done historically, has really represented the adaptive crowd, have this huge adaptive draw, maybe there are some hiccups there. And what I hope is everybody gives both competitions a little bit of grace, because they are the first time these competitions are being run. So the way I think they get successful is, and I'm a huge fan of this, is just the digital virtual coverage. I think that's a really nice way to make all of this more accessible to the rest of the world, because I imagine SoCal is just going to pull mostly people from there just because of the population density. And I imagine the WheelWOD Adaptive Championships will pull in a couple people from across the country, but it'll probably be localized to the CrossFit community in that area. So there's definitely a potential for conflict there. And I do think we have to wait a little bit longer than we all are going to be willing to see how this thing shakes out.
Oh, that happens every time. It's very frustrating. 2 points for James, and you can get going if you need to.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, James.
Goodbye, James. We will now go to Niki. What are your thoughts here?
I think it's hugely problematic. I'm sorry. I don't like the idea of having eyeballs taken away from one of these events. And even though one is outside of the regular competition season, even though we don't necessarily know who's going to be competing at Wodapalooza SoCal or what the structure will even be, right? Like, we've seen lots of competitions come out recently and have completely different structures and showcases of elite athletes and things that we've never seen before. So even if it's something fully brand new, to me, part of the benefit of separating out all of the different segments of the final CrossFit Games athletes is being able to focus more attention and detail and eyeballs on the different divisions. And I want the final championship CrossFit Games for the adaptive division to have all of the focus that weekend. And I want SoCal's first event for Wodapalooza to have all of the eyeballs for that weekend. And I think that the athletes want that, right? They want that for their careers and their sponsors and their longevity in the sport. I want that selfishly as a hopeful member of broadcasts moving forward. Like, I have to pick what weekend to go to. Are we going to say which one is more valuable? Which one we're more interested in watching? Like, I don't like it. And by the way, none of this throws shade at this year's event organizers, because this is the first time we're doing it. And I'm sure venues are limited, and I'm sure weekends are limited, and I'm sure timelines were very tight. But moving forward, I don't like it. there are lots of weekends in the entire year. There are lots of locations. There are lots of different places we can go. And I want to give each event and each athlete its due diligence and its attention from the community.
4 points for Niki. Tim, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I largely agree with Niki. And I think kind of what she said last really kind of hits it on the head, though, is that I doubt these organizers talk to each other at all. I think being the first iteration, like, I don't like it, but I also don't think that either organization, CrossFit, WheelWOD, or Wodapalooza, probably found out until announcements were made, and they're like, oh, shit. So I would imagine that there was obviously no ill intent, anything like that going behind it. But I do think that it's probably a bad thing, and it's a conflict because, again, like everyone has already said, you're splitting eyeballs. And I think that's why it really comes down, like, the onus needs to be on the CrossFit Games to treat this event and the age groups event, really give them the coverage and the push that they need and deserve to make sure that that event is front and center. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, like, this is going to be a competition between SoCal, Wodapalooza, and WheelWOD. It's like, who's going to get more eyeballs, who's going to be more present on social media, things like that. So I think it's CrossFit's job to make sure that they put some money behind these broadcasts between these live streams, things like that. Because again, I think a lot of people, they travel to the games because it's the games. But I think other than that, for the most part, you always see, like, Dubai doesn't really have a big crowd. People don't want to travel to Dubai because it's not a cool, fun place to go for most people. It's not on their bucket list. Whereas you look at Wodapalooza, yeah, everybody wants to go to Miami in January. SoCal, probably same thing. Everyone's going to want to go to Southern California in the, end of the early fall. Like, it's a great time to be there. So I think, whereas going to Texas in September, I mean, no shade on Chase or anybody down there, but I'm not sure what there is to really do or draw you to Texas in the, in the end of September down there. So I don't think you're going to get a big draw regardless, just because of the way CrossFit competitions work and how they are it has to be a destination that people really want to go to outside of the CrossFit event to really draw folks. So I think a lot of it comes back to eyeballs, live streams, marketing, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
3 points for Tim. Is there a way then that WheelWOD and SoCal can do something so different to attract people to watch. And I don't want to say that people should have to pick and choose, because if I'm a fan of the sport and I'm at home right now, I have 2 monitors and I would find a way to have both streams pulled up. But how are you going to get the backing of fans and people who are going to tune in?
I wonder if, because they're not in the same time zone, if they do speak to each other, because there's 2 types of viewers. There's the online viewers that are going to have access to both live stream. And then you have people who are going to have to pick and choose where they want to go in terms of physically, what do I want to attend? But I feel like potentially if they do talk to each other, and it's not going to be perfect, nothing's going to be perfect, but you could organize it in a way, kind of like what Rogue does with the Invitational, where you could have SoCal and then have a little bit of the WheelWOD and kind of place everything in a way that it would work over the weekends. Like we all remember regionals back in the day. If you had Europe and the East and the West, like you're basically like on a 72-hour binge of CrossFit and people are happy. So like if we can do that somehow, then I think it could be, especially for that first year, because I do agree with Niki that like this should not be the norm. You should not double book events, like ideally, especially in North America, right? Like if you're talking about Dubai and Australia, right, with the down under, they're on different continents. It's a different story. But in North America, you don't want to have to split that and have people make a choice. But for this year, I think there is an opportunity to talk to each other, learn, and try to bring the whole community together during that weekend, especially since Wodapalooza Miami edition has a lot of adaptive communities. And I mean, you can pull from that. You can use that as a resource. You can spread the interest for this year.
I normally don't give hold on one moment. I normally don't give additional points on follow-up questions, but I feel like Carolyn keeps crushing it on the follow-ups. So I'm going to give you 2 additional points.
I'm a slow starter, strong finisher.
Yeah. Hey, that's really what matters here. 2 more points, and then we can continue with follow-ups. Tim, did you have something?
Oh yeah, Tim, go first.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You too, Niki.
I was just thinking that, like, I agree. I think but I think honestly, like it has to fall on WheelWOD and Wodapalooza, because I don't really trust CrossFit to help coordinate a broadcast between the 2 of them. Like, I think perfect world scenario, maybe they coordinate a broadcast. Like if you're going to charge for a broadcast or something like that, like bundle the 2 together so that you pay for one access and you can watch it all. Like I think but again, that's a lot of coordination, and like everyone knows that the media, the broadcast side of events is incredibly difficult and like time resource intensive, time restrictive. So like I don't know if it would be even remotely possible, and it would probably require some outside investment, i.e. maybe CrossFit, because they are the ones should be backing WheelWOD as the event for those divisions. But yeah, like I said, I don't put a lot of stock or faith in that.
Yeah,
so.
I don't see that happening, only because it's a full separate entity. It's not a part of the CrossFit Games season. It's not a part of anything CrossFit. I just don't see that. And here's the thing, I'm just going to be very real, and it's unfortunate, but I think if you're Wodapalooza and you're famous for having top tier elite athletes doing cool shit at your events, and if you're a regular average CrossFitter that is going to watch whatever's happening that weekend, like we are CrossFit junkies. Like we have the double screens and the 72 hours of regionals coverage. Like the average CrossFitter, probably not so much. And I think most people will pick and choose how to spend their very precious weekend hours when they're not working and when they may be with their families or with their buddies from the gym, watching one over the other. And so my fear is that you can't really put top tier athletes on display against the very first adaptive CrossFit Games, because the average person who is only going to know the folks who come up on their Instagram feeds or the folks who are backed by major brands are going to pick the top tier elite athletes. And the huge roar from the community last year at Games was that coverage wasn't fair to those other divisions. And I feel that, but then those people really need to come out and support the final CrossFit Games for adaptive and for teens and for masters in order to make the whole divide and conquer and hopefully give enough detail to all 3 events in order to make that have the weight that it had and in order to make it worth it. You know what I mean? Like we really need to dedicate ourselves as a community to show everyone that that was a worthwhile decision and that we should be making more of an investment in each individual division and its coverage and its storytelling and its broadcast. So I just fear that we need the whole community on board, and you can't really necessarily rally people and pit one against the other when you have those two major events going on. It's not fair to ask the average viewer who maybe will watch an hour here or there to watch both.
So my follow-up question is, even if we didn't have SoCal, would people tune in? Like, are we actually splitting people's interests or not? Like,
that's a great question.
The legends, like if on that weekend, how many people are we expecting to tune in to the WheelWOD? Like, is that an interest to me, to you, to everybody out there? Like, potentially yes, potentially no. If the broadcast is good, if the resources there, if you're making it an amazing show and entertaining, because it's sports, it's supposed to be entertaining, maybe more people will show up over the years. But year one, I mean, how, like, what are the expectations? So that's question number one, just in terms of, like, are we actually splitting any hairs? And then two, it's September 19th to the 20th, 22nd, whatever. How many elite are going to be competing from the games? Like, I know SoCal and Wodapalooza, like, they're going to want to attract. A lot of people are paid by tier right now in that elite space. Like, but what, and this is where, like, I didn't know what to think of it, is we don't know what SoCal is going to be. Who are they trying to attract at the SoCal event? Because Miami has its own history. It's in January, like all of that. But in September, how many of the games athlete or the elite, or are they going to want to focus on maybe like semifinal athletes, like have more spots for them, organize something? We have no idea how SoCal is going to be organized. So, and again, are they going to put all this money into broadcast? Like Wodapalooza year 3 didn't have broadcast. We're expecting broadcast from SoCal because it's Wodapalooza, because of Miami, but are they going to pull all the resources and provide that to SoCal year 1? Should they? Could they, like, to me, there's too many questions. So for the elite and like spreading the audience, I'm not sure if that's going to happen because we don't know who's showing up for the elite and we don't know who's showing up for WheelWOD.
Wodapalooza SoCal should just be an eating contest for the elite athletes. It should be like everyone is recovering. No one is back in the gym yet. Everyone is eating whatever the heck they want, and I want to watch it. I want it to be like a pizza eating contest for the podium.
A competition that doesn't involve CrossFit, just odd end things.
That's all it's recovering and eating for time, and we get to watch. That's what it is.
I hope, because of when it is in the season, that it actually re-becomes a community event. Because a lot of the big name competitions now, because they've been running, like the French, Down Under, Miami, like they've been running for so many years, and you've been able to grow the level with the years, and, you know, it becomes prestigious and all of that. But I want to see a competition for the people who are making it, barely making it to semis or under that, right? Like the community wants to have those opportunities to feel good too. So I don't know. That's up to my Wodapalooza and like SoCal to figure out. But, you know, do we need the broadcast? Is that what we want? Like, where there's a lot of questions for me that are unanswered for that specific competition at that time period in the year.
Yeah.
More questions than answers. That is where we ended with this, but still a lot of good conversation around it. And I think it creates a good dialogue as we head into the season and everybody gets distracted, because before we know it, it's going to be here. So hopefully folks are out there listening and we can get some of these answers so we can start planning our calendar year. Wouldn't that be nice, guys?
Wow. Yes.
What a concept. Cool. That is my hope for 2024. Let's move into some Tier Wodapalooza specific conversations. Now, we have on, what is that, on Thursday and Friday, that is when the elite individuals are going to be competing. And we'll talk about this for both the men and the women's field. We'll start with men. Who is going to be the most exciting battle, and who do you predict to be the champion? Tim Paulson, you are up first.
All right. I think the men's field is honestly pretty easy because, like, you look at the field and it's everybody you want to see compete against each other. Like in the off-season events, sub Jeff, obviously Jeff's not competing, but like, you know, you got Ricky, you got Brent, you got Pat, you've got Roman, like, you know, you've got a lot of those podium contenders that are perennial. You're going to get to see them throw down, do their thing. So I think the men's race is pretty, I guess I would say, is pretty solidified. Like, someone's probably going to jump in there, make a splash, but like there's some big names competing for the top spot, and that it's going to be a great race. The women's side, I think, is a little more open. Like there's not as many, games athletes as I've seen in the years past. There's definitely some big names. I would say, I guess the people I'm most excited to watch, Danielle Brandon, if she can have a great rebound after the games, I think that would be big for just kind of confidence going into the season, things like that. And personally, just Olivia Kerstetter, seeing her continue to develop. Again, she just turned like 18 years old and she's already phenomenally, kind of successful in the sport. So I think seeing what she can do and seeing how she continues to progress is going to be really exciting. But yeah, I think the women's race is definitely much more wide open. You've got a couple big names who you assume will do pretty well, but there's a lot of, semifinal level athletes who are probably going to, slide into spaces and might make it interesting. So, but yeah, I think the men's race is, I think we all kind of know what to expect with the names you've got in that field.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot, Tim, and remember who your panelists are right now. If Jeff Adler was there, would he win?
Oh shit.
Honestly, at Wodapalooza, I find it hard to bet against Pat.
Yeah.
The dude just he brings his sunscreen and just does
Yeah.
it. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about Pat and Wodapalooza. Like maybe it's because he hates the sun, so he wants to work out really quickly and get out of the sun. Like that might be like his, kind of like his reason for Wodapalooza excellence. But yeah, I'm not going to say who would win, but I would say that, Pat, again, he's got a great history at Wodapalooza.
Yeah.
He's had a great run down there. So I'd be hard pressed to bet against what history tells me.
Oh, I love it. 3 points for you, Tim. Niki, who are your battles for the men and women, and who are your winners?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to jump, so I'm going to make this really fast, but I am going to fully agree with Tim. I think that Pat is going to charge up the podium at Wodapalooza, which is saying a lot, right? Because we've got Ricky, we've got Roman, we've got people on the competition floor that will give him a run for his money. But in my personal opinion, Pat is like powering up for double dad strength. And so Tim knows that kind of makes you unstoppable. You can't bet against that. And Tim, at this point, I feel like maybe that's your call to get back out onto the competition floor. You've got the double dad strength. I don't know, man. All I'm saying.
Are you trying to get me divorced?
But that's kind of where I'm at. I would really like to see. He's just had a banner season so far. Even he looked amazing at Rogue. We know that things are going well in his life, so I wouldn't bet against him. I really wouldn't. Thank you, guys.
And women real quick, Niki?
Women real quick. Agree with Tim. It's an open field. I don't like to bet against Danny Spiegel in Miami because I think in the past she's really pulled out a lot of stops, and we've seen the programming lend itself more to gymnastics and strength and weird things. She's also had a couple funky seasons, and so I feel like she's due for a comeback. That's kind of I'm just interested to see what happens there. We'll drop that. See what happens.
Okay, Niki, we will see you in Miami. 2 points, and take care. And Carolyn, last but not least, sorry that everybody keeps leaving us on the show today. It's not you, it's me.
They're intimidated. They're all leaving. I'm just kidding.
I know. They're scared. They know you're going to win.
So I think Pat is a safe bet, but that's not the one I'm going with.
Ooh, I love it.
So I think another Canadian is going to be topping the podium, and I think it's going to be Brent. So I looked at all the events and I spoke to Jeff. I was like, I need some insider trading information here. I was like, all right, this is like, we made a list and everything. But looking at each of the event, like we know who the top 4, Pat, Brent, Roman, and Ricky, that's who people are going to be watching. And then dark horses, I think the other 3 Canadians, Sam, Alex, Caron and Vigneault, they can kind of throw a monkey wrench, and those are going to be like people kind of battling, and this is who you're losing points against. But if you look at those top 4 and those other 3 of who's going to be stealing points, I feel like Brent can come ahead with this programming. So that's what I'm going. I think it's going to be very exciting. I think there's going to be a lot of good Canadian showing and like a lot of good Canadian battles. So I'm definitely excited on the men's side. But again, you can't discount Pat. Roman's always on the charge. Ricky's always good. Like, I don't think anything is like bad for any of them. It's just like, you can have one slip up. You can have like one bad judging call. Like something can happen. Like you never know. So I think it should be a good weekend for all of them and like very interesting to watch, but I'm voting for Brent on the men's side.
Get the maple syrup shots ready.
Yep.
And what about the women's field?
So in the women's field, I follow very little of that. So I have to like go look who's going, what's happening. I kind of did the same thing. I think there's people that are just like more consistent, like should do well. Gabby, Emma Carey, Ariel Lowen is like, where is she going to be? Right. And then there's a couple of other people that I think could always kind of surprise you on that weekend. But on the women's side, because I know less about like, statistically, like where they would fall on each of the events, I think it'll just be like fun to watch, interesting. And the top 10 is going to, draw stories, and it'll be like a really good show, but I don't have any like clear winners or podiums or anything like that.
Well, 4 points for you still because the Fikowski answer, I like that. That's a hot take, but it's one that truly could happen.
Yeah.
And I think as fans, a lot of us are waiting to see that.
Yeah. I mean, Brent, like he's been close. Like he was 4th at the games, 4th at Rogue, like, and Rogue with all the weather changes and like all the programming changes and all of that. Like, I think it impacted the leaderboard, like good at bana, like for whatever it's worth. But Brent is good and Brent is consistent. And I feel like with this type of programming, like if he's just doing like top 3, top 5, then it's the other athletes, like you get one, it's only 5 events too, right? So you get one bad event that's going to play a lot on the point. So I feel like Brent can just be like overall really consistent, and that's what's going to help him pull ahead. So hopefully.
Tim, did you have a comment?
No, I was just saying, I completely read over Ariel Owen's name. Like when I was reading through the roster, I completely just glazed right over it. I guess betting against her would also be pretty tough this weekend. Like she had a good year at the game. She's had a couple of them now. Like as far as who's in the field, I think, like if you were going to ask me to put some smart money on somebody, it would probably be Ariel, I guess.
It's going to be an exciting weekend regardless. There's elite individuals. They also have the team competition. Some are double dipping. We won't see Jeff. We won't see Tim.
Jeff will be at Wodapalooza, so you will see him. He's not competing.
We'll see him. Will he be in his Canadian tuxedo at any point?
He doesn't have a Canadian tuxedo. I don't think he knows what a Canadian tuxedo is.
Oh, I will send you pictures to forward on over to him.
I know what it is.
Okay. Get him in one. It would be very fun for everybody involved. But now, Carolyn, you've earned 30 seconds to talk about any topic of your choosing. You have the floor.
I had like 24 hours to think about it. I have no idea. Guys, register for the Open. Like, what's happening? Do you want to talk about the game season structure? I did listen to some of the past Death By, and I was like, ooh, I could talk about, I think it was you, Tim, that brought it up, like getting athletes paid for quarters. Somebody brought that up in one of the, and I'm like, how could we make that happen? Right? Like we have all these volunteers that come for semis for the games. Why don't you have open participants make a donation for quarters? You don't have to. Everybody's on the platform registering for their Open anyway. Like donate for that quarterfinal prize purse for the top 10 and like help those athletes move forward. And maybe that'll, motivate some of those athletes to not to perform better, but just like, there's money on the line and, for the top 5, top 10, like hopefully you're making it and it's not too stressful. But for some other athletes, like it could be an extra motivation to make some money and you're getting to semis and you already have, a little bit of money. So that was one thought that popped into my head.
Lots of great conversations today. Tim, Carolyn, thank you for staying through the entire episode.
You for having me.
We will see you in Miami. Tim, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And again, if you guys are interested in trying out Thirdsy, you can scan our QR code. We also have a link in our description. And other than that, we'll see you guys next time.